Your weather. Let's carry on though. We've got an interesting guest that's just joined us now. The South African Human Rights Commission is considering instituting an inquiry into the recent desecration of a mosque in Cape Town. This came after the Muslim Judicial Council lodged a complaint due to the pig snout that was found outside a mosque in Simonstown in Cape Town. In another recent incident, blood smearing was found at the Kalk Bay Mosque. This has caused a huge outcry amongst the Muslim community due to these acts that are seen as religious intolerance. To tell us more, we have now the South African Human Rights Commission Communication Coordinator, Gushwell Brooks. A very good morning to you, Gushwell. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, Peter, and to the people at home.
This is really worrying. I mean, this isn't something that we've seen, or perhaps it just hasn't been reported in the country where mosques are being desecrated in this way.
No, indeed. It is a very new and disturbing phenomenon. And of course, as you understand, we live in a very diverse country where we need to celebrate and we need to accept each other's differences based on race, gender, sexual orientation, including religion as well. In fact, our Constitution guarantees us those rights. Section 9 of the Constitution gives us the right to equality. Section 15 of the Constitution further gives us the right to freedom of religion, opinion and belief. And actions like these are clearly an infringement on those particular rights.
You're considering launching an inquiry. What would that do?
Well, the investigation would obviously look at whether, what are the circumstances under which, and I don't necessarily see any defense in this particular instance, to investigate the human rights infringement and obviously to come to a conclusion based on what corrective action needs to be taken. But I think beyond that, also the other thing that we have to highlight is that at this stage, no suspects have been pointed out. The police service, the South African police service, is of course also conducting their own investigation, but that's on criminal charges. I believe that the two most prominent charges, and of course more can be added, is criminal injuria as well as malicious damage to property. So on that basis, the police are looking at this from a criminal perspective, what the South African Human Rights Commission is. And based on our mandate as set out by the Constitution, we need to promote and protect and enforce the Constitution. And this is clearly an infringement on those rights.
Do we know what caused this? I mean, there's speculation that this guy, Liam Ferreira from Langaban, might have incited it, even though there's no real connection, because he was saying that he's fed up with this Muslim call to prayer 5 times a day, and he was quite provocative. He's since apologized, and there is no clear connection between what he said and what happened, but could these kinds of things be stoking the fires?
Look, I think as you very clearly said, Peter, there is no actual connection between the two. Or we can't, there is no factual basis on which we can say, or evidentiary basis on which we can say that the one led to the other. However, I think it should be noted by members of the public that our expression, and we have the right to freedom of expression, but we need to be responsible in exercising that particular right. Because you do not know what statement or what you have to say, how it impacts on other people and how it inspires them and what they in turn end up doing. However, I would loathe to want to speculate on who did what and who is involved where. I mean, some members of the media, for example, have asked us, is this a syndicate? Who is involved? We don't have any of those details, and it's not really for the South African Human Rights Commission to investigate that. However, as soon as the perpetrators have been found by the police or by members of the public, of course, that's where we will enter the fray.
Do you get a sense that perhaps we're getting caught up in what's happening internationally? When you look around the rest of the world, there seems to be a growing intolerance to some religious groups. And is it just that South Africa is not immune to that?
Yes, indeed. But at the same time, I think that it is actually an indictment on our society in this instance, because we have the best constitution in the world. And I know that's a cliche that's been thrown around on numerous occasions, but it is in fact the best constitution in the world. And it gives us rights and freedoms, and I think it's about time that as South Africans, ordinary citizens, we started internalizing it. And that's why I didn't use the word tolerance early on. I said accepting. We need to be accepting of each other's differences, because that is exactly what we inherited. That was the vision that was set out in 1994. That's the vision that was set out with the adoption of this particular constitution in 1996. So despite the fact that the world is going in one particular way, to quote Trevor Noah famously, we should maybe in this instance actually go the other way.
Your thoughts, I mean, you know, you're allowed to express your religions and so on and so forth, but I have heard this argument come up a few times, this call to prayer, and sometimes they've quite loud horns 5 times a day, and this might, some people might say, this is inconsiderate to people living in those neighborhoods.
Well, I think that if people engage in a conversation with the Muslim Judicial Council, these are issues that can be taken up. I mean, recently we had the instance of Valhalla Mosque, mosque being, that was going to be developed and built in Valhalla, which is a suburb in Pretoria, and there was massive outcry from the community. And when one actually engaged in conversation with the Muslim community in the area, what they made clear was that, look, in this particular instance, we can come up with alternative means when it comes to the call of prayer. It doesn't have to be an inconvenience for the rest of the community. And I think if we have dialogue,
more conversation is
then
required.
we're able to solve these
Gushwell, we're
issues.
going to have to leave it there. Something we'll need to talk about, particularly if this inquiry goes through. But thank you so much for coming through.
Only a pleasure. All the best to you.
That was Gushwell Brooks, who's the SAHRC Communications Coordinator. And we did invite the Muslim Judicial Commission to come through and participate in this conversation, but they were unable to do so at the last minute.